You are now entering Necamelo cyberspace.
My name's David. My favorite episode is Who Are You? In the second season of Andor.
And I'm Nick, and my favorite episode of the second season was Welcome to the Rebellion. So, welcome to our discussion on Andor Season 2. I'm bringing back my good friend David, who joined us on our Revenge of the Sith episode, and he is making another guest appearance for us while Carmelo is away in Taiwan. David, welcome back. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I have friends everywhere, just so everyone knows. David's down in Florida. I live in, Georgia, so me and David go way back. Literally since we were kids. I mean, we were 13 or 14 when we first met, something like that. Yeah, now we're 30, so it's literally over half our life we've known each other. So I adore David, and I'm so glad you are here, because, David, you have a interesting history, and you're a history buff. So Andor had a lot of, real-world parallels to not just today, but, human history. So I'm interested to pick your brain about that and talk about this awesome show.
Excited.
So you said your favorite episode was Who Are You? So why was that your favorite episode of this season?
I think it's just with the whole Gorman arc. I like to see how the resistance and Gorman built up, and then all the intelligence and counterintelligence that was going on, and just seeing how the Empire slowly went back on the words, but using fake justifications for it. It was very interesting to see that, kind of see how that parallels real world stuff.
Yeah, it was a slow build, I thought, for Gorman this season, because they played a big role, way more than I was expecting. For those of you who aren't familiar with Star Wars Rebels, big part of that show is the Gorman Massacre, and we see Mon Mothma escape the Senate and join the rebellion officially. This takes a little different angle, but when it comes to the Gormans, we spent a really long time and kind of get a feel of who they are as people, and kind of what their culture is like, what their history is like, and I really enjoyed seeing that side of it. It was a very slow burn, very different than other Star Wars shows, but I think it was very needed to see the massacre and kind of the fallout of that, because that was an intense episode, very violent. It didn't show anything too overly violent, but
Star Wars.
Yeah, there's no gore or blood, but the impact of the attack was very, very much felt.
Much like the K2 unit going through the square.
Oh my gosh, yeah, those K2 units were crazy. I liked seeing those in action, because we really hadn't seen them in action for the Empire anyway. We saw K2 and Rogue One, but really ain't seen them in action doing anything or fighting against the Empire or the Rebellion. So it's kind of interesting to see how they operate. One note that I thought was interesting during the massacre, I liked how it was incited by the Empire. They shot their own to start this riot and start the massacre. And then just in a fascist regime, it just goes to show that no one's really safe, whether what side you're on. They did really beat us over the head this season with the fascists and how fascism rises. And I mean, this is probably the most political Star Wars it's ever been, I think.
No, for sure. It's it kind of shows the banality of how fascist regimes rise, and their the bureaucratic systems kind of work in it, and how everybody's just I'm just doing my part and my job basically, and how those small compromises lead to these massacres and things like that.
Yeah, they definitely don't hold back, and for a fascist regime to work, like you said, people basically got to be complacent and continue to push that agenda and push that narrative. Even some of the people working within the Empire don't really see it as a wrong thing, and they kind of make Gorman into the villains, even though they're the victims in this situation. And we see that a lot in fascist regimes. There's a enemy, and we have to, basically vilify them in any way possible. And we see, I wish they would have done more of this in this season. I thought was very interesting was we kind of saw when Cyril and Cassian were kind of passing through the town and the square. We saw newscasters briefly and in the background talking about what's going on in Gorman and all that. really, and Rebels does a really cool job of showing that the Empire is not against like doctoring footage or doctoring the news to present to citizens. I wish we got to see a little more of that in Andor, because I imagine that's kind of what they did on the news, is talk about how the Gorman people are savages or villains, and then we see when Cyril does pass away and the aftermath of the massacre, we do see his mother react to the whole massacre. So I would like to see more of that angle from Star Wars. We don't really get a lot of the news. I'm sure there's a Fox News in Star Wars, but we don't ever really get to see that.
Right. The news broadcasts in Andor remind me a lot of what we heard like in the 2000s during the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, it sounded very much like the BBC or ABC News broadcasts. That's what it reminded me of.
True, yeah, it did.
During that whole period. And then, and then I think touching on Syria, it was just the end result of those that just like continually justify just doing their job. But the Empire is just willing to dispose of them like they're nothing.
Yeah, as soon as they're not useful.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can jump around to characters, and because there's a lot of interesting characters this season, but we'll start with those two, because when we left in season 1, they were hinting at a big romance with those two, and I was not really into the Nazi power couple, but they did it interestingly. We should mention, there were some time skips. I assume if you've got this far in the video, you just know that, but I think the time skips worked in a benefit for their relationship, because me personally, I don't think I really needed to see two Nazis falling in love or two fascists falling in love. I get it. They both have weird goals and are weird people, so I'm okay with us glossing over that, but I like poetically, they both kind of don't even come close to meeting their goals. They both are tools to push a narrative and regime that doesn't serve them at all, serves one at the top, and it's very tragic for both of them. Great actors. Like, I don't want to say they were wasted. I just want to see more of them. I don't know what else you could tell with those two actors, but they both brought their A game and beautifully acted.
Yeah, for sure. I think they both played their parts really well, and then they kind of get their just desserts in a sense, almost.
Yes,
just for being a part of that kind of thing. So
yeah, I like the irony of Cyril chasing the whole. I mean, his whole character arc starts with Cassian, and he spends his whole time on the show, following and moving up the ranks of the Empire because of Cassian and hunting him down. And then when he does finally, I like how there was no like insight in Cassian going to be on the planet. He just happens to come across him. And I remember watching the episode and I kept seeing those two like briefly miss each other. And I'm like, I'm excited to see what's going to happen when they like bump into each other, or they're going to see each other. And I had to go back and look, but Cassian met him, right? They met in the first season. Like, they seen each other. Or am I mistaken?
Yeah, they cross paths in
the first arc, right?
Yeah, in the first revolt sort of thing.
Yeah. So because I remember, I know he's been with the ISB and very well who Cassian is, but I was like, I guess Cassian, the time skip, I guess, does explain why Cassian wouldn't remember, but I feel like that's not a person. Cyril's not a person I feel like I would forget if I ran across him.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was very like funny when they finally start talking during their fight, and he's like, "Who are you?" Like, it just blows my mind, and you see that look on Cyril's face of like he just feels like a fool.
Yeah, I think they like crossed paths, and he was hunting him down in that first instance in the first season, and then I'm not sure if Andor was actually aware of who exactly he was.
Yeah, for some reason I thought they had crossed paths more than that, but I guess not. I haven't watched the first season in a while, so
yeah, it's been a couple years.
Yeah, I think I watched it last year, but so there's a lot happens in the show, so like I forget some of the details. This is a loaded show, and they definitely use their time efficiently.
Yeah, they get that much story told. They had to.
Yeah, and I mean, I think about it too. Like there's 2 seasons with 12 episodes. It's 24 episodes, and they're usually, I think the shortest one maybe like 45 to 40 or 50 minutes. So like, I mean, we're seeing a lot of these characters more than some of our classic characters that are in the movies. Especially Cassian, we're spending probably more time with him than almost any rebel ever.
Right.
So pretty neat. So we got a kind of a whole spin-off show of a character that was a co-lead of a movie, a spin-off movie, so a spin-off of a spin-off. So
Right. Yeah, and it's good to see like how the rebellion really like formed during the empire's reign. So it was nice to see how the empire's like little things were the things that like ultimately broke it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're kind of, now that I think of it, they're very similar to the Jedi in some ways, that they were a little arrogant and overconfident in themselves, and like nothing's gonna get past us. Like we got everything under control, and just like little things. Like I do like how I know we're skipping around a lot, but in Dedra and her kind of in the last arc for her, she just happens to come across the Death Star plans by accident. Like it's like a human error, in a world with full of technological advancements. Human error is what gives away the Death Star plans, basically. And I just like that because we're humans and we mess up and we're not perfect. So I think that's just funny how a little technical error like that, sending the wrong email basically to the wrong person ends up causing the downfall of the government.
Yeah, it was just interesting to see how much they try to keep it suppressed, and it backfired on them so many times. So like they sent out like a whole like manhunt for this one person, and it basically prohibited them from actually pursuing because it was just like overflow of information.
Yeah, that was incredible. How basically they spent years working on the Death Star, so like for them to keep it under wraps that long in that world is pretty incredible. I mean, it's hard to keep anything wraps in our world with all the technology and the use of social media we have. I don't know how they did it in their world, but nonetheless, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's
you mentioned the start of the birth of the rebellion. I kind of want to shift a little bit to Luthen and Clea and Mothma, that whole side of the story. Rebels did a really cool job, I thought. I'm going to mention Rebels a lot because that's one of my favorite Star Wars shows, and it takes place during the same time as this show, so I think it's relevant. But we do get to see like basically the finding of Yavin and setting up base there, and all the different leaders like Bail and Mon and Saw and Luthen, kind of the architects of the rebellion. I think I really enjoyed it. We get it briefly in the original trilogy, but not enough, where we get to see like the pilots and the everyday working class heroes of the rebellion. Like I would love a whole like episode of them just hanging out and drinking, and we don't really get to see that. And I really think it does a lot for Mon Mothma's character when we see her finally join Yavin and she's eating breakfast with everyone else. She's not better than anyone else. Her high life as a senator is over. She's boots on the ground at this point and with everybody else. I really enjoyed that part of it, of seeing the rebellion in many different aspects than we used to see. Especially from like the original trilogy.
Yeah, it was. It's interesting to see how they had to like negotiate with other members of the rebellion to get stuff done. But speaking on Mon Mothma's eating with the regular Joes, it was it's kind of like you're all on the same side at this point. Like you're against the Empire, so there's no class system as it were.
Yeah, and I think that one of the coolest aspects I thought of this season, speaking of the class system, in that first arc, the wedding and her friend that she I'm bad with names, guys, I'm sorry. Tay, I think his name's Tay or something like that. Guy that she grew up with in the first season, and
the liability.
Yeah, and like he kind of was. I think it's a real world thing. This probably happens all the time, where somebody's into a cause or into a fight, and then it doesn't really benefit them anymore. It gets a little too uncomfortable or too complicated, so they want to back out. But in Star Wars and the Rebellion, he's a liability, like you said, because he knows way too much and he's too involved, so they had to take him out. And I really like seeing that side of the Rebellion, and like you said, the infighting and the justifying their decisions amongst each other. The original trilogy is kind of a fantasy in a lot of ways, where it seems like the Rebellion's got it all together, and we get to see everybody get along, and we're all fighting for a noble cause. This show kind of peels back the curtain a little bit and shows that it was messy, even for the Rebellion. It wasn't perfect. There was a lot of mistakes and a lot of things that had to happen for it to be what it was in the original trilogy.
Yeah, I think the classic trilogy just use like the mythos version of Star Wars. versus Andor's giving you like the real history of the rebellion. So it's like, I mean, it's like in the American Revolution, you know, you get the whitewashed version of it, and then you dig into it, and you get like everybody didn't agree.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
So yeah, that was cool.
That makes sense. Like, it seems like Andor is like the real story of the rebellion, and the original trilogy is kind of like the propaganda piece that they'll show later in the sequel trilogy. Like, it was all fun and games, and everybody got along, and we just were fighting together, you know. But then Andor's like, no, this is what really happened.
Like, it was, y'all had to kill a lot of friends.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of friends having to turn on each other, and yeah.
Which is interesting to see the different aspects of the rebellion with like Saw Gerrera and the actual like rebellion front, and then like Luthen's front. So it's kind of interesting to see different ways of fighting the Empire. The results, I should say.
I think that really, it's crazy how Star Wars is, I think, better than any franchise at this. Is like a very minor character or small role ends up becoming huge later. Mon Mothma's in one scene in the original trilogy, and it's the only time we ever see her. And then this show stresses how important she was and shows that she was the one that really brought the rebellion together with Luthen and then with Bail and the other senators. Like, we wouldn't be there without her. And I think that was really cool how Tony Gilroy and the whole team on Andor just stressed the importance of her. And she was my standout character this season. I enjoyed her character so much.
She definitely finally bought into it in that episode where she speaks to the Senate and like risk it all, basically.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like I said, he's no longer a senator, he's a rebel.
Right. Yeah. If only we had real senators like that. Real life senators. Different topic for a different day. But you mentioned Saw Gerrera, and that was another character who wasn't in it as much as I would like. But when he was around, it was very impactful. And I never really thought about this when in Rogue One, when he shows up and he's got the breathing mask and he's, you know, obviously got the cane and everything. He's literally on his last leg. I just thought he had like been injured or he had been like in a battle, and that's what kind of scarred him up. And he's got the breathing treatment thing now. Now this show kind of puts a different perspective because I watched Rogue One after watching the show.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a breathing mask what he has in Rogue One. I still think he's like huffing that gas or whatever. Like, I think he's just, and honestly, I think it's kind of like an addiction, and I think he's kind of like lost his marbles, and I'm thinking that like that's kind of the way he is, and that's why they're like, we need to distance ourselves from this guy because that gas is literally making him insane. Like, he's a crazy conspiracy theorist that lives on your street, and you're like, I don't go to his house. You know?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, he's been fighting as a rebel, like a guerrilla fighter, since the Clone Wars.
Oh yeah, he was very young too,
and he lost his sister in that, so it's like a continuation. So it probably took a lot out of him seeing everything, and then yeah. So it's easy to lose your mind when you're meditating.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, like I said, when I watched Rogue One, I just assumed it was like, man, he needs to breathe, you know. Mm-hmm. But no, I think he's actually huffing gas in Rogue One. I think he's still huffing the little gas. And yeah, now Forrest Whitaker's a great actor, and I'm really thrilled anytime he shows up. He showed up in the Rebels for a couple episodes, and then he was in, I think it was the first Jedi Fallen Order game. I think he's in it. There's a mission that he's in. So great character, and it's like another character who was in the Clone Wars, and he was really in a few episodes, and then he got expanded upon and like told a really interesting and tragic story with a minor character, which again, I think Star Wars does that better than any other series in the world.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You get the, like I said, the mythos and like the big movies, and then you get the grounded reality in the shows, which is very interesting. Like two ways of telling a story, you know?
Right. Well, yeah, you know, in the movies, you know, you got 2 hours or so to tell a story, and you don't get to spend that time or dedicate as much time as you'd like to a character like Saul or Mon Mothma. But the shows, man, people can hate on Disney all they want, but I think a lot of their shows have done a really good job of fleshing out some interesting characters and telling interesting stories.
No, for sure. It's yeah, they're very impactful, especially nowadays.
Yeah. With themes in Andor, it's like hits a little too home. I have friends overseas that were watching it, and they were like, "Huh, that kind of feels very similar to what you guys are going through." I said, "Yeah, a little too close to home some parts, but still enjoyable, I guess."
Absolutely.
Keeping on the theme of the rebellion, Luthen, we get his backstory. We get a whole, which I wasn't expecting, especially towards the end of the season. We kind of learn where he comes from, and it's not really specifically stated, I guess, but it looks like he was either a part of, I guess, maybe the early days of the Empire, or maybe in the Clone War or the Republic in the Clone Wars. I don't know exactly who he's with, but getting a whole backstory on him was fascinating. And another standout actor, Stellan Skarsgård, is a heck of an actor. He plays that role so well. Do you feel the relationship with him and Clea, who everybody, the internet loves Clea, like she has become a fan favorite. I thought she was great. That was an interesting twist. But what do you make of Luthen's role in the rebellion and kind of his ending to his story? Because that was I had a feeling he was not surviving the season, but the way it played out, I really enjoyed the he kind of gave a middle finger to the Empire.
I think it's interesting you see in the flashback when they're eating that cafe and the Empires and the like stormtroopers are on the bridge, and he like offers her to blow it up to like help her, I guess, get through that process of grieving and like moving on from what she experienced. You kind of it's kind of interesting to see his commitment. Like he doesn't allow her to do it, and he takes it and like blows up the bridge. So it kind of shows his where he's at in the rebellion, sort of thing. So like he's like fully committed to like the end, which shows at the end of the show, or at the end of this arc, I should say, where to save like information from getting in the Empire's hands, he pretty much has Clea kill him.
Yeah, and they have a weird dynamic too, where she was very small, kind of like Cassian, very small when she found her paternal figure, and for her, like, I think she has a love-hate thing with him. The way I read it is, she obviously was in it for the cause and supported his cause, but he wasn't very loving and endearing to her, like a parent should be or would be. And when she has to basically put him down like a horse or something, or like an animal, I mean, it's kind of sad, but also kind of like a maybe a feeling for her that, like, this is kind of maybe not revenge per se, but like a relief, I guess, that this is over, because this season we got to really see their relationship tested through a lot of the times when they're very close to getting found out and discovered by the Empire, and Krennic is literally breathing down their neck, and that was intense and impactful scene too. I was sweating that scene. That was crazy. It just goes to show the hubris of the Empire again, because Luthen is literally breathing, he's right under their nose the whole time, and when they find out where he is and who he is, it's just a nice reveal and fun interaction between him and Dedra there.
No, absolutely. And then I think she underestimated his commitment to the rebellion. He stabs himself to kill himself. And then just the arrogance, you see it in the ISB officers that are like investigating the scene at the hospital, and they're like, it was like a team of 3 or 4 expert like spies. And it was
just one girl, just one little girl, just one younger girl. Yeah,
that's just all it takes.
Yeah, yeah. They it's like Cassian says in the first season, he's like, you can just walk in like you own the place, like they don't expect you to, and that's literally what Clea does. She just walks in like she works there, and they don't expect somebody like her to be able to sneak through and get past them because they're so confident in themselves.
Yeah, they're so confident in their like procedures and their protocols that like it's actually their weakness.
Yeah, no, it's a huge flaw in them. Another impactful person that I thought, or moment I thought that the rebellion had, was towards the end, once we're in the last episode, the main character or the main leader of the ISB, I forget his name, the older guy, Dedra's boss. That was a shocking reveal, because I was not expecting a suicide in Star Wars like that. I don't know if I read it 2 ways. One, he basically knew he was screwed, like he's going to get eaten alive, or he had no way out of this. Like, he can't just leave the Empire, like he knows too much and is too informed, like they're going to take him out. Or I took it as he heard Nemec's manifesto and was like, yeah, I'm part of the problem. So I don't know which way it was meant to be, but I kind of see it both ways. I don't know how you saw that, but
I think it's I think it's purposely left open to interpretation and all that, but which both can be simultaneously true, that he knew his career was over, like his life was over. And so I guess the last act he could make meaning out of on all this was killing himself. So.
Yeah. That very intense scene. I wasn't expecting it. Caught me off guard completely.
Mm-hmm.
I liked how they brought back Nemec's manifesto. That was very impactful.
I mean, he was right in his manifesto.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he totally was. We've spent nearly 30 minutes and we haven't even brought up Cassian. So that just goes to show you like how in depth and like impactful all these characters are. And I don't feel like there's a character on screen that is wasted during the show. But talk about Cassian and Bix, and that to me is the crux of the whole season. I guess, what did you make of their relationship through the show, and then what did you make of the ending? They both, well, we know where Cassian ends, but where did you make of the ending for them and their relationship?
I thought it was like their first part of the second season, they're just trying to survive, basically, just doing these missions and like deal with the grief or the trauma from it, especially Dix. So I think that's an interesting like aspect of the rebellion that doesn't get shown a lot, is the, besides the cyber era, is like the impact it has on the mental health of people. So, but I do enjoy like when they transition from moving from Coruscant to Yavin. They're fully committed to the rebellion, and like how they're I don't know, just like their whole like demeanor. They chose this, and it's no longer like being chosen for them. So now they can, like, Bix is no longer like addicted to like a drug, basically, and Andor's more committed to these missions, like even like screwing off, like saying like screw the rules, basically.
Right.
So
yeah, he's
those sorts
at that
of things.
point he's like following the protocols and procedures that the rebellion set up, and it felt like they also had a complicated relationship. Luthen, it seems like, had a complicated relationship with everyone, but with them, like you said, they kind of felt they were forced to do things or didn't really have a say in how things were going to go. And that changed when they went to Yavin. How did you feel of the breakup, I guess you could say, or the Dear John letter that Bix had left for Cassian?
I see the perspective that Bix had. You know, she understood that like the rebellion was something greater than them, and then the end of the show like shows that probably a more deeper reason why she left. So
right, at the time I don't think we knew at the
that
recording.
Yeah. So it's because I think he wouldn't have committed as hard as if he had known that, you know.
Oh yeah, he probably would have wanted to run away and hide off with her. I think the one thing I enjoyed, those of you who don't know, my type of Star Wars, I love Jedi and Sith and the Force. All that stuff is like bread and butter Star Wars for me. Like, I live for that stuff. But this show, you know, there's literally hardly any talk of that. But the Force healer shows up on Yavin, and that to me was the coolest aspect that the show introduced that I was not expecting. Basically, the Force healer, I guess I'm not under the impression that she was a Jedi or even formally trained like a Jedi or anything like that, but she knew of the Force and kind of knew how it worked. Her kind of freaking Cassian out and basically being like, you have a purpose, like you're a messenger, I guess is what she called him. And I guess that informs Bix's decision, like you were saying, to like, hey, like, I'm not the only one that sees it. Like, there's literally a zealot here on the base that sees it, and he has a higher calling that I don't know if I'm going to be the person to help him get through that. Just a fun aspect and wrinkle that they threw into Star Wars. Like, if you watch the Andor to the original trilogy, like, the importance of the Force kind of grows and grows and manifests.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that like develop over the series into the movie. Just I guess just like the Empire had flushed it out so much with like the Inquisitors and things like that, and then all of a sudden, like as more people like Nemec and his manifesto start to rebel and like try to get their freedom back, basically, the Force kind of like seeps through those cracks and like creates more, or like it grows more in the galaxy, you know. So.
Well, it just goes to show that like there's not just like Force sensitive people like the Jedi, like there's regular Joes in the Star Wars galaxy that believe in the Force too, and it's not just because there's Jedi around preaching about it, but there's like people who are like, yeah, all this stuff is happening, And I feel like there's a reason. Like, you're not just happening to happen. Like, there has to be a higher calling. And I think that's what the point of the messenger was, to prove that, yeah, like Luthen and Mothma and Bail, all these people organized the rebellion, but like they got lucky a lot. Cassian is involved in a lot of these, and I think there's even a point where I don't know if Luthen realizes it, but he calls to it where he's like, you're like showing up at all these important events. You were at Ferrix and then Naldani, and now you're here on Gorman, and now you're here rescuing my Mothma. Like, this feels like fate or destiny of some kind. Like, it's not just like a coincidence that you keep showing up to all these places, which I think just to me feels like a cool chosen one prophecy that's not really said.
I think it just probably is more like the message of hope overall,
Yeah.
like what power that hope has, and like resistance and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Cassian being the perfect vehicle, because I've in Star Wars always like the concept that like you can come from anywhere and you can do great things. Like we see that with Cassian, of course, but we also see it with characters like Han Solo, who literally come from the streets and become very important, impactful characters and make a difference in the galaxy and change the course of history. Like, just goes to show that you don't need to be a Jedi like a Luke Skywalker or Obi-Wan or Yoda to change the course of history. And certainly without Andor, like that rebellion probably falls apart, pretty quickly.
Even like the Force healer that was there, I mean, if she hadn't been there, Andor probably would have been like a whole other path.
So, yeah, and like I said earlier, I think this show does a great job of even minor characters. They serve a purpose. Like, they're not just there to be there. Like, they're just there. Like there's a specific reason they're there, and it forwards either somebody else's character development or the story in general. And excellent. That just shows how great of writing the show has. Any thoughts on, this is weird how this happened. I feel like this happens a lot. Star Wars kind of repeats itself in rhymes, with Bix having a child, Cassian's child, and being kind of left off kind of like Hera and Kanan. And then we've seen in Tales of the Underworld recently that happened with kind of Cad Bane, but a kind of reversal where obviously he's a terrible person and left his kid behind. What do you think? Is there a future for that character or for Bix, or do you like the idea of it kind of just being left open-ended and just kind of left alone, never really bothered or touched again?
I like that idea. I mean, it kind of just projects the image of hope into the future, sort of thing, with kids in the show. So, I mean, I enjoyed that idea, and yeah, it's just a powerful image.
It is. Yeah, it was a nice reveal at the end. I was not expecting that. And yeah, I think that's literally like Luthen says in the first season, I'm fighting for a sunrise I'll never see. And that literally rang true for Cassian, as we know where his fate ends. And then we see literally the mother of his child and his child getting to see a sunrise that he won't get to experience, but he sacrificed and fought for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all see how Rogue One ends, so
yeah. Oof, yes. Makes Rogue One hit a lot harder, actually, honestly, since seeing all these characters, and not just Cassian, we see other characters in the show kind of, and we see them later in Rogue One and kind of where they end up, like Malshi and K2.
A whole platoon.
Yeah, whole platoon, those guys. I mean, there's I've even noticed online, there's like background characters in Rogue One that are playing significant roles in, or background characters in Andor that are playing significant roles in Rogue One on like the base and stuff on Scarif. So, really cool how they just utilize and make use of every character on screen.
Yeah. It was just nice how it all culminates together in Rogue One. Like all these different strings threaded together into like a tapestry, if you will.
So is there any connections from Rogue One that you liked that was present in this show that you were like, oh, that's great that they added that, or great that they included that?
Jeddah. With Saw Gerrera, I like that. You get why he's there, basically. And then I loved seeing the K2 or whatever, fighting off the elite stormtroopers, basically. So, and I like how they continued like the military style training of the stormtroopers and stuff like that. Their movements are very like professional, like they did kind of in Rogue One.
He was really only in it for a few episodes, and I get it. I mean, he's probably not a character. I mean, like, he's so big and strong, like, you can't really have him around all the time because he's probably going to just wreck things and probably solve a lot of problems. But the little scenes with him playing cards and hanging out on the base, like, I love those little moments, and they're just like having K2 around. I thought he was wonderful, and his first appearance when he gets reprogrammed is hilarious. I love how they kept that humor, and Andor is really not a show for humor, but K2, they really kept him true to form. Like, they didn't try to make him fit the theme of the show. He's still K2 at the end of the day. So that was nice that they kept that continuity.
It was interesting to see the Admiral Draven and a bunch of the other leadership there that were in the movie, and like how much they're willing to go to protect Andor, especially Admiral Draven when Andor gets in trouble when he returns. So it's just amazing.
Yeah, and we get to see like the first discussions of them discovering the Death Star, or the idea of the Death Star. It fits well nicely with the movie. Luthen obviously wasn't a character when the movie came out, but seeing his final mission basically kind of carry over into lead to Rogue One was a cool send off for him, and having those senators, I don't remember their names, but the ones that are basically questioning everything, they did in Rogue One as well.
Yeah.
Those jackass leadership position jockey. Yeah, like
there's always someone.
There are always those cynical people who are basically, not buying into the message of hope, but
yeah, they're just there because circumstance or whatever have you. Like there. And then, I mean, to be fair, it was just a rumor at that point when they were questioning it. So
that's fair. Yeah, and Luthen, like I said, was a controversial figure for a lot of people. Really, Cassian and Mothma were the only two that really had any kind of relationship with him. I assume the other people in the room probably just heard stories or rumors about this guy, and they're like, no, he probably sounds not much different than Saul. We need to separate ourselves from him, so I get it. I get the questioning of it.
So we have to be this noble rebellion, and
right.
The other Saul and Luthen are like, we gotta get our hands dirty if we're gonna win.
Exactly. No, there's a great quote in Rebels between Saul and Mon Mothma. When Mon Mothma was basically pleading like, hey, we can't fight like the Empire because, we don't want to be like them. We want to be different. And which I agree with, but Saul makes a great point. And he said, well, to the Empire, we're both criminals, regardless of how we carry out our actions. They don't see it that way. They're not going to care. So that rang true there. I want to ask you, what did you think of Bail Organa in the show? Because he was a great use of his character. And of course, the big recasting was a big point of discussion for a lot of people. But how'd you feel about him in this show and his role?
I think the actor that played him did a great job. And then just seeing him navigate both worlds at the same time was very interesting. Because I know in Rebels they have to save him too.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
it's just interesting to see that before that happens, like how he's like, I'll just stay here, you go.
Right. No, he does a great job. I do wish they got the original actor from the prequels and Rogue One. I forget his name; it escapes me right now. But yeah, no, I thought the new guy they got to play him, I didn't learn his name either, but he was great. I do, like I said, for continuity reasons and for it's a small nitpick in my brain. Like, I do wish it would have been the same actor, but they got somebody who I thought did a great job. And honestly, you couldn't avoid not having Bail Organa in this show. I mean, I guess I understand the reason. I don't like the recasting, but I understand having to recast for reasons. I mean, you can't not have him. Like, he's so important to the rebellion, and obviously
he's
pivotal. We know. And great thing I think is his relationship with Mon Mothma is very pivotal, because not just for those two, but for Leia, because in some of the expanded material we've gotten in books, and especially in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, we get to see Mon Mothma kind of being like a mentor to Leia. So their relationship here definitely kind of backs that up and kind of feeds into that.
No, absolutely. You need to see that in Rebels, where it kind of takes it a step further. Them and Mon Mothma beyond words, and she's like in the field doing stuff against the Empire.
Yeah, and she's young too at that point. She's like a teenager.
She's very clever.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. I like the ties to Rebels and just other Star Wars media. They did a great job of that.
Yeah. I mean, even one of the Battlefront books, Twilight Company, does like a really good job with even the ground troop, like how difficult it was for like the rebels fighting on the ground. So, and just the continuity of that throughout the whole series. So,
yeah, since Disney has purchased Lucasfilm, and they've done a lot of different stuff, but I think one thing they've done great, and I think most of what is done during this era I've loved. Not everything's going to be great for me, but most of it I think it's pretty solid and pretty good. But one thing I feel like they've done the best, is things like Andor, Rebels, Rogue One, Bad Batch. Like when it comes to the Imperial era and the stuff that ties into the original trilogy, I feel like they don't miss. They do a pretty good job of making it fit and making it impactful to the original trilogy and to future stories. So hats off to them.
Oh, for sure. It's a lot of detail to fill in. So
yeah, they do a really good job of kind of painting the picture of the rebellion and the war between the Empire.
Even after.
Yeah, even after, yes. So as we're wrapping up, do you feel... I'm the type of Star Wars fan who I always want new stuff, but to me, Star Wars is always going to be foundationally, and a big part of it is always going to be against fighting oppression and fighting a fascist regime. Is there any other stories you want to tell or you would like to see between the Rebels versus the Empire? Or, is there anything else to say, or do you feel like we should jump to something new? Because I'm on the fence about that, but I was curious what you thought.
I'm ready for the Mandoverse movie to tie everything up.
Okay.
I would like some more detail with the sequel movies to explain how the First Order rises a little more. I know some of the comics help with that, but I think visual media in terms of shows would help a lot.
Oh, definitely.
And fill that universe in, that part. And I also would like some High Republic stuff, some more of it.
Yeah, I'm on the fence. Like I said, I love the original trilogy and Rebels and Rogue One. That era is just great and a lot of memorable characters, but I do, like you said, would like to fill in some new gaps and some new stories. Like if the team of Andor was interested or willing to do a series that takes place during the sequels and shows the rise of the First Order or the Resistance, I would watch that 7 days a week. I'd love that. I think that'd be awesome to see the rise of fascism and again, even after it was defeated,
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing. I mean, it's never really defeated because people always want safety and security and times of chaos.
Right. Well, and I think it's I've seen a lot of people complain that, with Andor and all these characters that made sacrifices to make the rebellion work, that it's just unfortunate that the First Order just comes, a generation or two later to kind of reintroduce the same problems again. But it kind of happens in our real world too. It's not a thing that just goes away after it's defeated,
I mean, has it been 100 years since the end of World War II? So.
Right. It has not. We're kind of seeing some of that
same
ideology and way of thinking coming back. And so those generations, fought, but it doesn't mean their sacrifices any less.
Mm-hmm. Should serve as an example, more or less. So,
yeah.
What
exactly.
individuals can do.
Well, and you think about, this show come out this year, but the show's been in production for a couple years now. So at the time they were filming and making the show, they didn't know what the future really was going to hold the next few years. But unfortunately, it's topical because of the time it was released. But they were just taken from real world history and past fascist regimes like World War II. And I see a lot of especially in the Gorman arcs, the parallels to Nazi Germany and to how that all played out. So it wasn't they weren't planning for the regime that we're having now or the what's going on now, but it just happened to work that way because it came back.
Yeah, it was kind of I was thinking about that. It was kind of a funny coincidence, or not so funny coincidence, that the time it came out and what's going on currently. But again, I think it's good media to have to show what individuals can do. In any form, to resist those kinds of regimes.
Exactly. And one thing too, you mentioned earlier about how people in those regimes, they will just say, I'm doing my job or I'm doing my part, the Fallen Orders. Also, it does show on the flip side that yes, people do that, but also that even the smallest of roles or people in society can fight back too. We see the Mark Gorman, one of my favorite characters. I don't even know his name. The little bellhop, the guy that works at the hotel. What a great character. And just he literally delivers the line and the theme of Rogue One. And it came from just some guy who worked at a hotel and wanted to fight back. And it wasn't like a Jedi who said it. It wasn't a senator who said it. It was just some guy, and Cassian took that to heart and ran with it. And I thought that's really cool. Who anybody literally just kind of talks about what I said earlier. Anybody in Star Wars can make an impact and inspire and make change in the galaxy.
No, for sure. I mean, there's in World War II, there was a French woman that her sign of resistance was just giving the Nazis like the back part of artichokes and so like that was her form, like just little things to like be like, I don't agree with this.
Interesting. I did not know that. Yeah, I mean that's a very like
it's very mundane, but it's also impactful.
Right. I mean, it's not going to stop the Nazis, but it's going to definitely be an inconvenience to them.
Yeah. You're and enough of those like
small acts can lead to
just
something bigger.
It's like a huge flood, so that happens. So, because like in the manifesto, Animix manifesto, it's like so unnatural to be like controlling everything of society. So
exactly, yeah, and I mean, there's no way around it. Like some of the characters on the show, kind of even Cassian in the first season, like he's like, well, I'll just kind of go and do my thing on this beach, and I did my job. Like they're not gonna mess with me. And he did one of the most egregious acts in the Empire's eyes with, the heist on Eldani, and then he gets arrested for something mundane. It's just like walking down the street. So like that's how fascism works. Like, you don't have to be committing crimes for them to just lock you up, basically. I mean,
they can justify it any way they want.
Right. And that's what they do. And that's what Andor highlights so well in the first and second season.
Yeah, it's just the bureaucratic nonsense that usually gets.
Exactly. What a good show, man. It's one of those heavy shows that I don't know if it's going to be very rewatchable for me. Like, it's not one I'm going to put on all the time when I want to feel good or like, have a fun movie night. It definitely makes you think and definitely incites conversation, which I think the best media does.
Yeah, that's the whole point of art.
Exactly. Yeah. It ain't a popcorn flick, but it is a topical, real-world analogy for what we've gone through in our human history and what we're currently going through.
Yeah, and it's just I mean, the last point I want to leave on is just Star Wars is always political. So.
Literally.
It's always been.
This is the most political show they've ever done. The most woke show, I will say, they've ever done, and nobody complained about it being woke, even though they literally beat us over the head with it. So it was not subtle at all in this show. So it's crazy how nobody complained about that. There was no complaints about it being woke, but it definitely was. Definitely was the most woke of anything.
For sure. And we still live, so
we're still here.
This must not be that bad.
The world's still turning.
Yeah, we must be grown-ups that can think for ourselves, too. So.
Yes, exactly. Well, David, thanks for joining me, my friend. I love our discussion. I couldn't think of anybody better to ask because I know your background in history and your love for history, so I knew you were a wonderful person to bring on and to have this discussion.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I would love to have you on again about some other stuff. We're not going to have any shows, it looks like, for a minute. I don't know if there's any other, aside from Ahsoka, there really hasn't been anything announced or coming that we know down the line, but I'm sure something will arrive, and we can always have you on for other fun discussions if you would like.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, guys, thank you for listening to another episode. Be sure to like and subscribe and do all that stuff to keep up with new episodes. And Carmela will be back this summer to the States, and we will be working on season 4 and going to be putting that together over the next few months. So we'll look forward to that and look forward to having David on again and hopefully some other guests to get some different perspectives in here. So thank you guys, and may the Force be with you.
And with you.